Hello and welcome to the Gooners Podcast, Season 5, Episode 66. Busy Arsenal year this year, but I'm already thrilled because James Benge is with us, and he didn't log off during the opening video, as most of our guests do. So great to be back. Great to have you back, James. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on. It's been a crazy few days,
especially at a time like this. Your time is much appreciated. So of course I'm going to start off with a bit of wackiness. Do you know what an Eskimo brother is, James? Are you familiar with the phrase? Okay, well, look it up later, and then you'll probably never talk to me again. But I kind of consider you our Josh Kroenke Eskimo brother in a sense, because as we've talked about on the pod before, you, myself, and Andy were 3 out of the 5 people in the room a couple years ago in Denver that night hearing Josh talk. And, I don't think there's any long-term relationship coming with John Cross or James Irwin. Is it James Irwin?
Mark
Irwin. That's right. I knew that. Yeah, whatever. Coming. So alas, you're stuck with us. But maybe we're gerbil brothers as opposed to Eskimo brothers. But it's always a bit odd here in America seeing, just getting used to you being on CBS Sports, because that's kind of like the American access to Europa League football. We know it's not just the European feed. It's not the Sky Sports before the game and then the world feed. It's our own exclusive content, and there you are. So how's that gig going for you?
I love it. It's fantastic. I mean, it is a real privilege. I think everyone knows the CBS name around the world, but even then you kind of don't really. It's when you first log into that Slack channel, the kind of all staff Slack channel, and you see how vast this organization is. But I mean, you guys see the pre-game shows for the Champions League. You see the quality of people I'm working with. It is a daily privilege to be doing this, and thank God Arsenal are one of the teams I get to cover. We'll see if that's the case next season. But it's been a joy. It hasn't been a joy at all covering them this season, but it's been interesting.
Yeah, and the one thing I've noticed that's changed a little bit. Now, wink twice if they made you get in that suit, because I've seen you do your journalistic duties and not been nice and relaxed and dressed down for the event, but this was the most dapper I've ever seen you look, rocking that tie.
When you're breaking major news, I'm not even going to lie, I wore a blue tie to as my own little tribute to Chelsea. Obviously the first team to jump off the move. I think they were jumping on the train and they jumped off it. Everyone might discover they'd broken some ankles, broken some kneecaps, but it was a little tribute to them. I'm in a much better mood with Chelsea. I mean, well, again, you can only be so impressed. You know, the fact that everyone's sort of taking a dump in a hotel bed that they're all sharing, and Chelsea were the first one to leave, doesn't mean they're not, covered.
I hope that's not coming from that analogy isn't coming from personal experience.
It's not from personal experience.
Okay.
I don't know where it's coming from.
Well,
but, there's no pride to be taken, but I have a scintilla of gratitude amid the disappointment and anger. I think you can't help as a human being, even though it's probably not right, you can't help but think, thank God Chelsea did. They were the first ones.
I have no doubt if the first game, and Liverpool Leeds kind of came soon, but the first game to be played after that, was anybody of the other top 6 teams, I think you would have seen the same thing. I hope you would have. But whatever got you looking this dapper, this sharp, I'll give thanks for. So way to go. So we're supposed to be happy now, right, James? I mean, I'm not happy.
No.
And we talked a little bit yesterday. We were chatting and you seemed to kind of understand where I was coming from. My approach from Sunday to Tuesday was I'm gonna chill. I'm gonna wait a little bit. I'm gonna wait to worry. I did a lot of learning, a lot of reading, a lot of listening to other people, a lot of podcasting, chatting with people. And while I hated the idea, to me, it just seemed to be kind of too early to really figure out what all this meant. I understood how bad it was, but I was like, I'm not going to waste my energy yet because I don't really know what this is going to end up being, and it could all be over nothing. It was more numbness than anger, and a wait and see attitude. Then the announcement yesterday of us officially pulling out. Now I'm angry. Isn't that weird? Like, now I'm angry.
Yeah, I think the anchors, I mean, I had something not dissimilar. I mean, I'll be honest. First thing I felt when this dropped, I was panicked. I work for a company that owns the right, that made its jump in, hopefully my company won't mind me saying this. It's only my own experience, that made a jump into world soccer, European soccer, by buying the rights to the Champions League and the Europa League. And I was fucking terrified that, my company had just bought a rights that were worthless, that were worth nothing. Let's be honest, if this had gone through, no one's watching the Champions League. And that's the other thing that one of the things I found mingling with every moment and everything I was thinking was, well, God, if this actually gets to kickoff, if this gets to the first Arsenal game, I won't be able to help myself. I will want, with your fan hat on.
Yeah,
I think we would all have eventually got to the stage where, well, if this is happening, we've lost, and they're going to get us. They're going to get the football world, because how can you not want to watch Arsenal against Real Madrid if that's it? If it's there, if Arsenal are competing for a league title or whatever it was with the biggest teams in Europe, they're going to snare you. And you could maybe hold out for a year, but it would have, once it got to kickoff, it would have won. So I really struggled, but yeah, I was hugely disappointed in Arsenal. Angry. I think don't forget they were among the ringleaders in this, and no one will deny that. No one at Arsenal will deny that this has been in the pipeline for several years. That they have been involved in
expressly denied that. Expressly set the scene. We'll break down the statement in a minute, but it expressly stated that they cast them in a light of being subject to peer pressure, a do it or get left out strategy.
But that doesn't mean they weren't. That doesn't mean they weren't there from the off, and they have
right,
been.
Well, but it implies that they weren't. They said, well, we were approached. We all know that they were the ones, at least early on, doing the approaching. If they weren't in the very first stage, they were in the first stage of development, to where they were one of the, I'm making this up now, but if there was one mastermind that got 4 people involved to then get 12 people involved, we were in that 4, not the 12th team. So,
I mean, from what I've heard, and I don't have the sources of, the very top reports, but I've asked a few people. My belief is that there are, if you look at the Premier League, there was a tranche of 3: Liverpool, Man United, Arsenal. The others came along a little bit later. Obviously, I think we all know this is really brainchild Perez and Yeli. I mean, because they need the money. Same with Barcelona as well. That it's a.
Then they went to the Americans.
Yes, because it makes sense to the Americans. I mean, we will probably never fully know exactly the order that this played out in, but I know with relative confidence that Arsenal were not in the same position as Chelsea and Man City, where it did come to them quite late in the day. And I've got no sympathy for the argument, but their argument is, we were told, get in or get lost. It'll happen, and it's, you do then have to kind of make the decision, can we afford to not be in this? But Arsenal can't make that argument.
I love this from Dimitri. He says, the statement from Arsenal was equivalent to "It wasn't me" by Shaggy.
And it was like, I don't sympathise with the view that we had to be in it. And I think the worst thing is it kind of plays at fan emotion, because what would be the only thing worse than this happening would be this happening and your team not being part of it.
Yeah, that is true. But, I just think it's an incomplete admission to exactly what happened. And the worst possible part of it is the fact that they are saying that they essentially made this decision because of the overwhelming sentiment from the fans and from others. I mean, that's a nice tip to the cap if you don't know anything about the background of it. If you think that this came up, that they were approached 2 weeks ago, thought it'd be a great idea, made the decision through normal internal channels where they consult people, they don't leave their players in the lurch, they don't leave their fans in the lurch. But if you know the background, you know that this has been a point of emphasis, and this is why I do this, A, to make myself look more important, B, because it actually matters. I keep talking about that conversation in Denver in 2019 because the reason that conversation took place, as you know, is because of a manifesto that came from the We Care Do You movement. And I'm not going to comment on the movement because the movement has its own political and sociological and all that, and didn't necessarily become something larger than itself. But the manifesto that came out in the mid-July 2019 was very well done, in my impression.
Yeah.
What kicked off the need for Mark Ganella to scramble around and get Vinay and Raul and Josh into that room. I'm glad that it did, but one of the things in that manifesto that was very, very strongly worded was about a proposed European Super League. This was no secret. Kroenke had talked about it. Dean had talked about it. It was rumored to be coming more to fruition. And, what we saw from Josh Kroenke was a lot of lip service paid to the competitiveness of the team, whether he cares or not. Silence, crickets about the European social league, the European Super League. And for nearly 2 years thereafter, not just crickets, but deflection, diversion, not answering questions in fan forums, not answering questions when posed to them by the press. I mean, in those 2 years, have you, in your position in the press, ever discussed the potential for a European Super League with members of the board and or administration and or ownership of the team?
I haven't, which I regret, but there's always, I think the challenge with that story is it's always in the background until it bursts into life. No, but I mean, I think, we know that the conversations were ongoing at the time we spoke to.
Had to have been, which is what leaves me with such anger, because I went back and looked and I kind of released a novel today on Twitter. Just kind of woke up and started writing it, and a lot of that was drawn from the exact quotes that he told us on that night in Denver, and how they look now in hindsight.
I think one of the things that's really apparent over the period, kind of beginning with the sort of fall of Arsene Wenger, and you'll remember that in the final months of Wenger's reign, Josh came out for what I believe was termed a fact-finding spell, couple of weeks, 3 weeks, with Arsenal. And that's kind of when his influence really starts growing. And as we know now, I mean, of course, Stan has been integral in the Super League, but Stan is not integral in how Arsenal run on a day-to-day basis. It's certainly Josh, my understanding is has a greater influence still. And in that period, when you look back at it now, the leadership of Arsenal have been throwing trinkets at supporters that they think will just make them leave the bigger issues alone. And I think that's really about transfer policy. Arsenal have spent a huge amount of money they don't have and continue to do so, spending some way beyond their means and requiring their own owners to chuck them what is effectively, crumbs from the table.
The loudest voices have always been about transfer policy and spending money, but those are not the only issues that the consistent voices have brought up.
Well, it doesn't change the fact that you can spend your own money, and I mean, it's still we still never. I've been told that the Kroenkes helped to finance the Thomas Partey deal. Now that isn't quite the same as saying it was their money,
right? And
obviously, we know they did the similar thing with Pepe, where they offered guarantees around the loan. we still, by the way, don't know the terms of the loan that Arsenal have, or the interest and all that on the loan that Arsenal now owe their owners. But it's been baubles. We've signed Nicola Pepe, but we're making 55 members of staff. We're making 55 members of staff redundant, but refusing to cut the transfer budget, refusing to make the hard call.
All while knowing that more than likely £300 or £400 million is on its way into the house. I mean,
exactly.
Even more sinister when you consider that, and I'm making some suppositions, but I mean, the people at the very top had to have known that while the club itself was, Tim Lewis came in to clean up the finances and the structure of the club to make it more, lean, I guess, during this time. But if £400 million is coming in, you could do something crazy like, I don't know, sack Jose Mourinho with £40 million left on his contract or something. So, that makes the we're skint argument a little less endearing in hindsight.
It's a really tough one, but I think for the coming years, I think we will always look back on some of the decisions that were made, and an Arsenal supporter and people that write about Arsenal, like myself, need to always remember the decision that the club made in the summer of 2020. And I get a lot of children on Twitter, young fans on Twitter, and maybe fans that are more invested in squad building and results. And I get them telling me, well, look, the redundancies had to happen. And of course, you have to manage your staff. And of course, you have to invest in your playing squad, because eventually, if you let that atrophy, then you end up having to make some even harder decisions down the road if you're not even getting in the Europa League. But everything we see has to be at Arsenal has to be put through the prism of they made 55 members of staff redundant when they were working to bring in £300 million for the Super League, pulling Arsenal, away from the traditional structures of the league that we love. They made 55 staff redundant whilst negotiating a contract for Willian, who implausibly, despite the fact he cost them no money, might go down as one of the worst signings in their history.
James, they nearly, if not for a miniature version of the fan outrage that we've seen over the ESL thing, they nearly made Mark Brindle redundant at a time where, which is essentially, it makes a lot more sense now that they were going to do that, because his connection to supporters is less important when you're moving towards just, globalizing, which I don't have a problem with globalizing, but like now it makes sense that they were okay disconnecting such an important personal connection to so many supporters and supporters clubs,
And I think what's really sad with all this is, and people like Mark, is that, and there are most of the people I speak to at Arsenal, and I would go right the way up to Vino, who I wouldn't say I know well, but obviously I've had a conversation. They're not bad people.
I had a follow-up conversation with him that was very encouraging. When that tour swung around to DC, I had a nice conversation with him.
And they can't
like the guy, but I want to talk to you about him in a second. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
But the staff at Arsenal care deeply about the club, because a lot of them have worked there for a very long time. However long you've worked there, there are values to Arsenal, and they do embed themselves in an organisation. And I don't want to go kind of end up having an Arteta in or out conversation, but there's been a real attempt since Mikel Arteta's appointment to start rebuilding that culture, start re-energizing the place. And I see day in, day out, whenever I get to speak to people at Arsenal, go to Arsenal, I see people that really do care about what they're doing and that value the badge that they're wearing when they work. And then it becomes really hard to square that with the actions of ownership. And why
is Jerry Quay without a job right now, without the job that he loved? I mean, that just seems, ridiculous. Mark Brindle would have been another one. It's just, it is hard to square. What, speaking of Vinay, what role I'm seeing people calling for his head. I'm seeing people saying that he is going to be sacrificial lamb to, in the Ed Woodward style, I guess, although I'm sure those situations are very, very different, that, that will be KSE's sacrifice to the Lords to apologize. I know, and in fact learned this about 15 minutes ago from my mate Fergus, but I know that he was apparently part of the ECA, the European Club Association, but I'm a little bit confused and hope you can shed some light on, what involvement would Vinay have had, leading up to, during, and after this announcement and process to where he's being considered on the chopping block.
I don't know how involved Vinay was. That's the starting point. We know where this has really been driven from. We know it's been driven at the highest echelons of the club. I would sort of,
Here comes your article from 2013, James.
Yeah, I know that Josh didn't take that headline well. I
almost got kicked out
of the room. 2013. I haven't been in the industry that long. Make me look old.
Well, it wasn't 2013, but you were the one that wrote that interview. But,
I do remember.
And then I almost exposed you in front of Josh. But sorry,
that's what he said. I don't know. Obviously, he only recently joined the European Club Association, and I think from a personal perspective and a organisational perspective, the chief executive of Arsenal Football Club would not make himself look like a complete fool by joining the ECA, quitting, I believe it's 6 weeks later, if he was fully aware of what was happening.
So you think he's got plausible deniability?
Well, I'm legitimate. I have to say I'm speculating. I do not know. I also think it is worth pointing out he's very new in this job. He's been doing this job less than a year. And one of the things we've been saying throughout, ever since Arsene Wenger left them before, since that, season when he was handed the contract after the FA Cup final, is that Arsenal needs stability. And I do think that even the Kroenkes understand that the last thing they need to do now is find another chief executive. So again, this is I can only speak to my expectation. My expectation is that tomorrow Vinay will be at the fan forum and he will be and I don't know if anyone else will, but that, I would not expect, just my opinion, I would not expect Vinay to be moved on. I don't think that helps Arsenal. I think that also Arsenal fans are comfortably intelligent enough to know that this isn't a move that, this isn't a Vinay Venkatesham led plan, and that he is not the one that is responsible for the reputational damage that Arsenal have suffered over the past 48 hours. And it would not stop people protesting against Stan Kroenke. I don't particularly think that Vinay is viewed as a Kroenke yes man. I might be wrong there, but I think he is, he
probably is to a certain extent.
But well, in the same way that anyone is, if that's your boss and they're paying you your wages, clearly, I think most fans would not say, "Oh, okay, you've sacked the chief executive. The chief executive has departed. That's fine." This is about ownership. Right. It's not about management. That's the big difference. So I don't think he will go. As I said, I really want to emphasize this. I'm just speculating there. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, and I, I'm just trying to find an understanding reason as to why he would be held with it. He's either, like I said, he's either being called for him to leave, or people are just assuming he's going to leave. And I'm like, why? I don't understand. Other than the fact that the statement that was put out last night was signed the board and not,
well, he's not on the board.
Stan Kroenke. No, he's not on the board, but that should have been signed by Stan Kroenke, not by the board. I mean,
unless this was Lord Harris's plan all along.
Right. I mean, Lord Harris of Peckham, maybe behind this. I would have, blamed Sir Chips for something like that. Actually, no, they probably would have stopped something like this. Not nice people necessarily, but they would have stopped this. Thank you, Daniel Bailey, the Blind Gooner. They might keep up the great work. We need to get Stan out of our club. It's now or never. As my tweet earlier today kind of aligned, I'm not big on hashtag in, hashtag out type of arguments. I really am not. I never once typed the words Wenger out, even after I thought he should leave, unless I was quoting somebody else or talking about how I don't think it's helpful or reasonable. But it was almost cathartic today to type Kroenke out, because I do feel that way. I don't know that I'll be at the head of the public relations campaign, nor would anyone want me to be for that. But I just can't help but no longer feel comfortable. No longer there's any bit of trust, and the trust that I gained from watching Josh, hearing him really sound kind of like he was struggling to put the words together. Not a polished statement in front of a board of journalists and executives and advertisers and sponsors, but an impromptu interview at an unexpected time that it drew me in, and I feel now like I was duped. I mean, some of the things that he said in that meeting, I'm not in the business to make friends. Okay, that's true. I'm in it to win. If anyone's ever going to question anything about our ownership, which I view as a custodianship, even though one would say we're owners of the club, that's not a complete statement, I guess. But he's recognizing the custodianship of the club, and the supporters trust us to be the custodians of the values, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to win while also respecting the values and traditions of the club. James, he in the back of his mind, the word Super League have to have been, bouncing around in his head while he was saying that.
Yeah, you could. I mean, frankly, they're not ticking either box, are they? I think.
No, the winning. There were some good moves made that summer. Kieran Tierney, Gabby Martinelli, an attempt at signing a world-class player in Pepe, who still, jury's still out. They made those moves, but I mean, values and traditions.
Yeah, I find it when we talk about Kroenke out, I think we also have to be really, really clear that
it's not going to happen.
It may well not happen. I can't speak for how he's feeling. Certainly, his asset has just taken a hammering in value compared to where it was on Monday morning. Kroenke out and who in? That
is the unanswered question. I don't know anything about Alisher Dangote. I don't like what I've heard about Usmanov, other than that apparently I look like him.
Well, that ship has sailed.
Yeah.
Dangote, go and ask people in Lagos what they think of Dangote. There is the odds of you finding the billionaire owner who's earned his money only doing the right thing, who has only wants to allow the club to develop in the right way, in a morally acceptable way, but will put his hand in his pocket every once in a while, and for whom you don't have to ask yourself any uncomfortable questions about what it means to support Arsenal if it's owned by X individual or X sovereign wealth fund. Infinitesimally small.
Mark Cuban, and that's it. and not everyone likes how he's gone about things, but it wasn't through communist systems. It wasn't through human rights questions. It wasn't through any of that. It was through technology and being kind of a brash jackass. But that's you couldn't have a better owner than that. But he's not. I don't know that he's got the $4 billion just to dump on a football team. And look, he's one person out of $5 billion. So you're right. You could end up with a Mike Ashley. You could end up with a with worse. And
exactly. But that also doesn't mean that kind of he gets away with this. I think he above all else, and this is I spoke to Tim at AST. Yes,
Vince McMahon. That they're already playing the music at halftime that you hate.
Exactly, would really add some pizzazz. I think right now you kind of need to think, well, what can Arsenal supporters control? What you can do is you can really put pressure on Kroenke to start listening. Get a supporter. It doesn't need government legislation for him to bring supporter voices onto the board and to give the board real power. That is within Arsenal's control.
Onto the board, not onto a Zoom. onto the board. Yeah.
It is within his control to. I mean, in the end, he can't. I mean, he can't come to the Emirates for years.
Yeah.
And everything, he has to fix everything to come back to the Emirates. But what he can do is he and Josh can start attending these fan fora, start holding them a bit more regularly, and start listening, start talking to fans. There have to be ways and means in 2021 for him to actually engage with his own supporter group. There have to be ways and means, and that's all you can hope that he just gives up and sells. But I don't particularly think that right now. I don't know whether that's what he's going to do, and that I think is really hard to control. But what you can do is make it intolerable for him to not listen to you.
Yeah, and that's the question that I was asked on Twitter. Was what would it take for him to sell the team? I mean, we can put that in financial terms. I don't think he is impacted one iota by negative sentiment against him. I don't think he can be shamed out of this club. I just don't. And so it's really going to have to be some sort of financial situation, and it's unlikely to be a financial situation where someone makes him a deal he can't refuse. It's going to be a financial situation where he bails out before it gets worse. And when that happens, we're screwed. We think we have it bad now.
Tried very recently to make him a deal that he can't refuse. And the response from Stan Kroenke was to make Usmanov a deal that he couldn't refuse and to take complete control of the club. Of course, you can want Kroenke out, and if you want to do as much as possible to make him as uncomfortable as you can, from London to LA, if you want to try and get that message across, as long as you respect social distancing guidelines, please do it. Please.
Yeah. By the way, James and I are not actually 3 inches apart. I know it looks like it on the screen, but through modern technology, we are socially distanced.
The protests, it will have an effect, but I think as other people have also said, it's going to require that may not convince him to sell the club. What may be needed is the government does intervene and does demand spaces on the board for football supporters.
And is that how government really should be? Should government be getting involved in that? That's an other discussion about it. I mean, we'd love the outcome, but that's a precedent as well that,
completely 100%. But I just don't know how to fix this. I'm just looking at what Mike says there. After St. Louis, I don't think fans make any difference to him. Yeah, I mean, exactly.
He announced a move. I mean, imagine him taking now. Arsenal's been in North London for 100 years, been around for 140 years, and St. Louis Rams were not originally from St. Louis and didn't have the more than a few decades there. But he took the landmark franchise in the NFL, franchise being used intentionally, and moved them back to where they had been 30 years earlier in Los Angeles, absolutely devastating an entire city. He announced he was going to do it. The city did everything possible, both financial and otherwise, that they could to try to save it, protest-wise and all that. And he said, I don't care, I'm off. And he'd do that probably with Arsenal if he could. If it was the same level of free movement, if all it required was 3/4 of the other people in the Premier League to do it, and if owners of Premier League clubs were an old boys club like the NFL is, it would have been done already. Although London is one of where you would want to be, not where you want to leave.
So but the one thing you can hope for is that, well, at least Arsenal is where you want to be.
Right. Yeah. I mean, just theoretically speaking, if that didn't bother him, then nothing fans can do or say. And I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't do it. And yes, I've kind of laughed at fan protests before. I've laughed at the Wenger out protests. I've laughed at and I know the people that have put these together, and I'm sorry, but the protest when they were selling the new shirts and you're standing outside the Armory with people protesting who have just bought the new shirt. I mean, that's never caught on. I think this time maybe a bit different, James. Do you think? I mean, I wish I was there to talk with my feet. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, well, I have not really seen any pro-Kroenke arguments. The fan base is united. The fan base has not been united about Mikel Arteta. Took until the last minute, really, I think we have to say, for everyone to agree, I'm not having Unai Emery. That was a more existential thing, but it did take a long time. The fan base was of course, not united about Arsene Wenger. I have not spoken to an Arsenal fan in a very long time who has said to me anything positive about Stan Kroenke. And I've
defended. Well, first of all, I've always tried to put a difference between Stan and Josh, and I've said, Stan is just a despicable human being beyond anything that has to do with Arsenal. I mean, I don't like his politics. I don't like his game hunting. All of it. I don't like it. But Josh, to me, from an Arsenal standpoint, stewardship, I viewed as being the lesser of two evils. And an opportunity, and I've defended them against criticism about the money spending part of it and the way that they run the club. But as far as custodians of our club,
and I think what I want to say is, because you see this on Twitter and all that, and I increasingly just don't care, but sometimes it riles me. It is important that fans are exposed to what the defense of this is. Internally, what the internal view, what does the club want you to know? For instance, the club wanted you to know in the 48 hours that they were joining less than 48 hours that they were joining the Super League. They wanted you to know that this was about safeguarding the financial future, not just of the club, but of the pyramid. They really emphasised, triple the solidarity payments. Now, I spoke to people at the club and I said, I don't believe a word of this. They wanted you to know that this was, we feel that we have to be in this if it's going to happen. We can't not be part of it. They wanted you to know that we think that really what fans want, and obviously it's clear they don't, in this format, is the most competitive, the best teams playing more often. And actually, I think one thing that we shouldn't forget is we do all want that. We just don't want it like this.
Yeah, we don't want it shoved down our throat, and we don't want the novelty of it to wear off within 6 months either.
But I mean, on that, I've always tried to sort of reflect what Arsenal would tell you about Stan Kroenke, or what they would challenge you with, which is he may not be the owner you dream of. He may not be Roman. If what you dream of is an owner that writes you checks for £300 million every summer and says, have at it, have some fun. He's not that owner, but that he would, he would stand back and, in footballing terms, let the people he's hired get on with the job that he's hired them to do. And he would say, I don't know anything, but I'm not going to get in your way. And to an extent, he's done that. That comes with its drawbacks. Meant that Arsene Wenger was left hanging on for too long. It meant that Ivan Gazidis was the same. Clearly that something was wrong with Raul Sanllehi that was not picked up on until it was too late. But, that you have to see that side. You have to acknowledge that, you have to see what the club want you to see and then make your own decision. And then, you get all this bollocks in your replies about Arsenal. It's stupid. It's brain dead idiots who want their own views reflected back to them. But, that's what Arsenal want you to know.
Yeah.
But it's all irrelevant, because in the end, what he has said, he has not lived up to. He has not let football people get on with making decisions, because the most significant footballing decision that Arsenal have made, arguably since since the Premier League at the very least, but arguably since they relocated from Woolwich, Arsenal players were not consulted on. Arsenal players never, ever, in the brief period that Arsenal were in the Super League, no one at Arsenal told the players what the hell was going on. Hector Bellerin was supposed to go on a conference call a few hours ago today and explain what was going on at Arsenal, and he didn't have a clue because no one had told him. And that speaks to indifference and a sort of blasé approach to running this club. You know,
Well, they still think that this club is run from the top down, and they have not quite understood, despite all the platitudes and words that he said in 2019 and ever since, that this club is run from the bottom up, or it should be. It always has been, not always has been. And I know that David Dean wanted to, was behind the Premier League and as a breakaway league. I know that, Arsenal is not necessarily always been the epically model humanity type of, that's impossible. But to the extent that is possible within a massive football club, Arsenal's always been a bit different in a good way. And this just rips that entire thing away.
But I'm kind of thinking back to, I did a big piece when football came back about everything Arsenal had done during the pandemic. And it was so much great stuff. And I know, obviously, you guys do this as well in Arsenal's name with Gooners versus Cancer. The Arsenal Vision podcast guys do that. And I think part of that is a reflection of the culture that makes people gravitate towards Arsenal, that they are a really conscious community club. Exactly what's kind of going down across the screen now, that they really, a lot of money was given to local causes that needed it. And you see then ownership really debase those values. And I think what I think Arsenal fans have found really unforgivable is that this is the kind of moment that the things that lie beneath your love for a player, which can fade, your love for a manager, which can fade, is your love for the principles and the core of the club.
The ideals of the club, yeah.
And what you see when you see the Arsenal badge, we joke about Classnall, but that was what was attacked by ownership. And the same is true at Liverpool in particular, and the other big six clubs. And I don't believe that this owner can ever recover from the damage he has done to how Arsenal fans perceive their own club. It is shameful.
No, it is, and I fell in love. I started going to Arsenal because there was a tube stop on the same tube line I lived on as a 15-year-old on the Piccadilly line, and I just followed people into the stadium. But I stay 32 years later because of the team that I eventually learned that we are. The club and and what I've learned more than anything else, especially in the last 5 years of doing this podcast, is what it means to people. I've always known what it meant to me, but I never really knew what it meant to other people until I started talking to other people. I started meeting people who went to games in 2014 to 2016. And ever since, that appreciation for what the club is in totality has become the reason that I love the club, because frankly, the performance on the pitch, other than a few really, really great days in May over those 6 or 7 years, hasn't been, that engaging or enthralling. So there's got to be another reason. Couple minutes left, James, a couple questions that are semi-related to the ESL. You have a time for just a couple?
Yeah, go on.
Okay. Jose Mourinho. Was his sacking anything to do with the Super League? Did they expect to pay off his 30 million contract with ESL money that they're not going to get now?
No.
You believe that it was purely performance based and the announcement of it was not coincidental?
Yeah, it wasn't coincidental because
do they want to bury it?
I don't know about that because no one at Tottenham will tell you they want to bury it. But the performances have been really bad. Like it was a justifiable response to the way the football was going. So no, it wasn't to do with the ESL.
Well, and he doesn't turn things back around. He turns them around initially, and then once he's lost it, he's lost it. We know this, but they didn't reflect that in the terms of contract that they gave him, though. Yeah.
Well, there's still a lot to be worked out about exactly how much of what is believed to be owed to him he actually gets and how much of it is performance related. That's one thing I would say. And I don't know the answer. But I think one thing I found very odd is people saying, why would you sack him before the cup final? Well, because you want to win the cup final. And your best bet is, the
That bounce.
Chimeric, concept, the mythic concept of a new manager bounce is probably more likely than the tactical plans of Jose Mourinho to beat Man City. That's why you sack him before the cup final, because you're more likely.
I was really not. I was, just like they always used to say about Arsene. I'm Jose in, but we've lost that. All right, this is very important. You, Wheatley, Watts, McNicholas. Who wins in a fatal 4-way wrestling match? What's your finisher?
I just kick him in the balls.
I think there should be fatal 4-way boxing.
I would. Watts has got some old man strength.
Well, and he's a big fan of the WWE, doesn't he?
Exactly.
And so he knows some of those moves. He can, when
you sort of see
you hate the WWE, don't you?
You see a sort of middle-aged man on the golf course, and you're like, right, he's got a left hook on him or a right hook on him.
I thought when that picture fell behind him that we were going to see some incredible Hulk shit, where like all of a sudden he starts growing. Have you seen that video he tweeted where he was getting ready?
Oh yeah,
this one. I love the guy. Oh,
that's literally my reaction when I saw the Arsenal tweet, "We're joining the Super League."
Everything that was on my walls in my house broke and fell down.
My tactics here are kind of let Watts do the dirty work on McNicholas and Wheatley, and then when he's tired out, I'll come kick him in the balls and win the fight.
Wheatley's got the youth. McNicholas is just going to throw himself over the top rope because
his grandfather was a boxer, I believe.
Well, that's true. That's actually true. But his one-man show, which I was lucky enough to see the night before I had to come home because of COVID, I went to his one-man show in Soho, March 11th last year, and fantastic show. I hope he's able to get that back up and running. But it was basically to talk about how his grandfather was this boxer, and he was this little. There's a Yiddish word called nebish. Like think of like a nebish is like who's the director that married his stepdaughter?
Woody Allen. Yeah.
Woody Allen's a nebbishy little guy, and like it was James McNicholas's typical self-deprecating humor about how he's the furthest thing from a boxer. But so I picture him like kind of squaring up to somebody and then running away, and then it's left to the three of you guys.
But look, I couldn't bring myself to hurt these guys. I mean, they'd have to say something first.
And I think there should be 4-way boxing matches. Like you see that in fake wrestling, but you should see like there should be 4-way boxing matches. Like not only do you try to punch the guy, but you got to be aware that someone's coming at you from the side. But that's a different.
I mean, boxing and Formula One are the two sports that for me sit in the world of this should be a lot more fun than it is.
Yeah.
I mean, both of them. It's like just boxing. It's like how is you finding it so difficult to really punch this man? I'm not big into it.
Yeah, like 6 rounds in, there's like 4 landed power punches.
You've had 20 minutes, and this is all the damage you've done. Formula One, it's like I honestly would find it more exciting to watch some cars go down a motorway.
Yeah, I've never really gotten that. I've never really gotten that.
We've been here 20 minutes, and you've managed to overtake each other once. Like, go fucking drive on the M25 and you see what overtaking looks like.
Your comment about boxing is hilarious because you'll never see 2 guys square up outside the 12 pins and have it last 6 rounds of 3 minutes each. That thing's over within 45 seconds, one way or the other. So, I take it I think I've seen some tweets from you with with disdain for the new music coming out of the halftime at the Emirates. Is that Nigel Mitchell that runs that, or is he just the announcer?
I don't know if he does the halftime music. I should find out. Obviously, like I really like them. I mean, they have the playlist they play pre-match are stunning. This is the joy of having a young football squad, a squad full of young people. And obviously it's their dressing room
mixtape.
Yeah, it's their dressing room mixtape. So it's just like, God, you guys are keeping me young.
But then Triple H coming out of the half,
Jesus. I mean, that's like, come on, you're not 14, lads. But whoever they started playing Piggy as well. Juicy's been like playing every game this season, and I just imagine that when there's 60,000 fans back, everyone will be
I was going to say that the music is really just, I mean, other than maybe a little bit over the broadcast when they come back, it's pretty much just for the journalists at this point.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Keep you lot quiet.
So I'm sure Charles Watts actually probably supplied them with the playlist, since he shares my secret but not so secret enjoyment from comedy purposes of professional wrestling. So. Last thing I heard yesterday when you were on with Jess, great interview, by the way, that you're a Knicks fan, and so welcome back to Relevance. I can't even claim that the team that I like is not as much of a joke as the Knicks, but for some reason it's just I'm a Washington Wizards / Bullet supporter. So one championship and the rest of it is a joke, and I couldn't care less these days. I'm a fair weather fan when it comes to American sports other than hockey, but in any case, did you ever notice that the Knicks arc, like when they're good and when they're bad, is directly proportional to Leeds United? Think about it and do the research. They are literally the Leeds United of the NBA.
Okay, yeah, I see that.
Late 60s, early 70s, championship, relevance, then
that
the
hard ass 90s, that 90s brand of basketball,
early 90s where they almost got there, and
mate, I'm rooting for Leeds now. Leeds are my second Premier League team, which feels wrong.
That was literally my next question is, given what's happened with Arsenal, I mean, when do you start, changing, swapping out? I've already gotten this in reserve just in case, because I want to support a new soon to be football league club. So I'm going with Sutton United.
I have to say,
Leeds would make every bit of sense for you, though.
Well, yeah. I mean, I just moved house. We're still having the builders in, so we are about 5 or 10 minutes walk from AFC Wimbledon's ground, and I am just minded that I'm not going to bother with for my own enjoyment. I'm not going to bother with Premier League stuff anymore. It's boring. It's not going to get more fun. Actually, in a perverse way, I've almost enjoyed the last 2-3 years a little bit more, because it doesn't quite feel like the same season playing out over and over again, the same fight for fourth place. I just would like a little bit of variety in my sport watching life. That's I've followed the Knicks not for that long, sort of on and off for 10 years, and got really into it in like the last 5 or 6. But like, at least they give me something other than like purposeless winning.
Yeah. No, they're finally getting their status back, and honestly, I'm sure 12 times or 20 times as much as I do about the state of the NBA right now. I just don't follow it, but I do know that the Knicks are kind of all of a sudden back.
They're fun. They're a fun young team with some like weird reclamation projects. Whereas I just
look who's dropped in.
We got to change the view though.
He came to see what you were wearing today, I was going to say, and then I'll throw it to Andy. We've already taken him beyond his 45 minutes that we wanted to have, but what do you?
I thought this was the Pro Super League podcast.
No, that's an idea that we were keeping to ourselves, guys.
That's why I came on.
Your dreams have shattered. You and Florentino Perez, the last two standing.
I heard you guys starting to talk about the NBA, so I wanted to jump on. That's the new pod, right? NBA?
Well, yeah, and who owns your NBA team?
Oh, isn't it the guys who
that's true. Well, your local NBA team.
Yeah, the NBA team I grew up in college watching. Isn't it the guys who own Palace?
No, I'm talking about the Nuggets.
Oh, no, yeah. No, I don't care about the Nuggets. Milwaukee Bucks for me. I had season tickets to the Bucks when I was in college.
Oh, no, that's the guys that own Villa.
Yeah, that's right. They own Aston Villa. That's right.
Do quite a good job of running sports teams, which apparently is a job you can kind of have now and be incredibly wealthy doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But did you guys cover this, James? Do you know, is there going to be an official statement from the Kroenkes coming out?
You've had it.
Like an actual video. I want to see tears.
Yeah, like John Henry's released a video now.
Well, and the Glazers released one too.
I thought they just did the statement. Have they done a video as well?
Well, I mean, it could have been a screen grab, but I didn't watch it, but it looked like there was an actual video of him talking to a camera, but it could have just been the screen grab.
I'm going to tweet out, and Andy, you know exactly how I'm going to accomplish this, and you hate it, but I'm going to be tweeting out an apology video from Josh and Stan Kroenke a little bit later on today.
Is it going to be via that jib jab?
Absolutely. James, I know you've overstayed what.
I mean, if you've got anything else, go on, and we may as well take it to an hour.
Well, beautiful, and so I was going to tell you the Sutton United thing is only half a joke. I started going there every time I came over to London to see Arsenal because I was fascinated by their story when we played them in the FA Cup. And I got to know a couple of bloggers there, a couple of guys. I was like, how do you go about this? And I linked up with these guys from Gandermonium. The experience is amazing. I've talked to these guys, and some of them are supporters of Premier League clubs. Like, my question is, like, who's your Premier League club since you're local to and you love going to Sutton? But I was shocked by how many people are like, what do you mean? I don't have a Premier League club. Sutton is my club. And they know full well that they, or at least their feelings were, we're going to be in this 5th tier league forever, although they are really, really, really close to being promoted into League 2 this year. But like, it's just fascinating to me. And your comments about maybe I'll just focus on, on lower league football and the romance of it is a very good point. And I would urge people to, if they can, to watch it, if they can, to go to a game, go to Leyton Orient or something. Don't go to West Ham for another Premier League game if you've got an extra day. Go to Leyton Orient, go to Brentford, go to, smaller clubs and just see what it's all about, because the passion there is genuine. And
I feel like the embracement of the fans is different too.
Oh, 100%, because there's only like 300 of them to embrace.
Well, yeah, and when they hear you, like if you're an American and they hear you talk, they're actually in, like, if you go to Arsenal and they hear an American, like, oh, another, but if you went to like even Portsmouth, when I go with my family, people are like, why are you here? It's like, well, give them the story, but people are genuinely interested. Like, why are you at a lower league football club? And they'll buy you a pint or something, but
they want to hear your story.
It's like such a different atmosphere.
I think that's going to be a really interesting bone of contention that's going to last for a very long, this is an issue that you kind of feel bubbling away under the surface with some Arsenal fans, and like kind of may well need to be, you can't address it, but you feel this right now that this has kind of only served to deepen the divide between some fans that view themselves are viewed as legacy fans. I believe that's the term that ESL are using, i.e., heart of the community, and you're placing them against international fans. And I've said this before. I did a Q&A with the guys at Arsenal Addicts, and until I came on the tour to the States, met you guys, saw the Arscast Arsenal Vision crossover in LA, where people had flown from across the States, saw the events, and saw people in Charlotte, saw people all over the US. There's no less passion. No one is more plastic. No one, just because you can't go to the games. And I feel like this is going to be a discourse that floats around fandom, and it's not a huge issue for me, but it's going to float around fandom over the coming years. And it's so sad because, the people that, just because you're not kind of born within, sightline of Highbury doesn't make you less of a fan. Just because you're, you guys getting up at like 4 a.m. to watch games, or, staying up till midnight on the, on the other side of the world. And also just because you were kind of a bit excited. If you're a younger fan, I think, like I heard from kind of quite a few younger fans that were like, actually, I want the Super League, and maybe I'm not like kind of happy with everything about it, and I might like the jeopardy of relegation, but I want to see my team playing. Like, again, you're not less of a fan because of that.
Right.
I think this is really like there are going to be kind of long-term. There's going to be an underlying long-term divide that only grows between legacy fans and the younger people from around the world that are gravitating towards Arsenal, Man United, Liverpool.
Well, and like that, and thank you for those words. I mean, it's always nice to hear that. I'm hearing that more and more. I think where Andy gets mistaken for being an American a lot, and so we hear that a lot. But I think that is really changing for the most part, other than the most hardcore of proper fan versus tourist type of people. Frankly, I think it's gone so overboard, and this would be a kind of a perfect bracket for the ESL conversation. I think the fact that we're actually being sought more than what they call the legacy fans, and for a long time I felt like season ticket holders, members, people who go home and away haven't been recognized or treated by the club as well as a Yank who lives in DC and travels, didn't even have to travel for one of the games last summer because they came to my town, and gets to experience a fan event with giveaways and player interaction and gets to hug Gunnar Sor. I mean, the opportunities for the people who really put in the most work that that just happen to be their geographic, I think they're getting absolutely shat on.
And I think that some of those fans kind of blame the wrong people. They
blame us when they should be blaming the club.
Exactly. And the club has kind of not particularly treated season ticket holders all that well. You pay an awful lot of money, and the facilities have things at the Emirates have started needing a lick of paint for a little while. And this all needs to, we could go on and on for another hour.
All right, cool.
But wherever these fans are in the world, Arsenal need to start reaching out and addressing them. And it may never, going back to what we've been talking about myself, it may never repair the relationship with the owner, but you can't control who owns your club anymore, sadly.
Yeah.
But there are other people in the club who do care, and I hope they're able to sort of, that relationship can be fixed. But I fear I might be wrong.
And my message to the club would be, yes, you need to reach out. You need to change things. You need to improve communication. You need to really take actions rather than words. But my speaking as a foreign fan, start at home. Start there and build it from that, because without the Super League, you may look at casual fans as being 80% of your revenues and diehard legacy fans being 15 to 20% of it, but they're the 15 or 20% you need to start with and then take it from there. And that's all I've got to say about that. James, appreciate you joining us and for staying long. Other than on CBS here in the US, where can you be found, read, enjoyed?
Oh yeah, only CBS. They wouldn't let me be spotted anywhere else.
Other than here, they're like, oh, no one's going to see that anyway, so we don't worry about what you said.
Yeah, exactly. They'll never know I did this. I'm just really worried that Slack is going to light up when I log off.
Exactly. All right. Well, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for coming on with us again. Hope to see you soon with some better, more enjoyable things to talk about. Andy, I miss you, bud. Good to see you again.
It's been a while. It's been a while.
All right. Well, that's it. We'll be back, I guess, Friday night, an hour after the final whistle for the Gooner Open Mic post-game show. That'll be 11 o'clock UK time, 6 o'clock Eastern time here in the US. If you want to give your views on the game, on all the stuff that's gone on this week, the floor is yours. Just jump on to GoonerOpenMic.com and spend about 5 or 6 minutes chatting with us. And until then, come on, you Gooners.